And the fact that anything works out is amazing. And it's so, like, if you believe that everything was always going to happen, then falling in love or running into your old friend or any of that stuff, it's like, well, this is inevitable. But if it's just wild chaos, then when things work out, it's really should be more beautiful.
That's Sasha Sagan, and this is the Powerful Ladies Podcast. Hey guys, I'm your host, Cara Duffy, and this is the Powerful Ladies Podcast, where I invite my favorite humans, the awesome, the up to something, and the extraordinary to come and share their story. I hope that you'll be left entertained, inspired, and moved to take action towards living your most powerful life. Guys, the episode you're about to hear is awesome, and it's an example of what can happen when you play big. After finishing and loving Sasha Sagan's book, For Small Creatures Such as We, I immediately thought she needs to be on this podcast. I wanted to talk more about the book. I want to have a conversation with this person to whom I saw so many similarities to myself. And I wanted to bring this important conversation about community, rituals, science, and religion to all of you. I did just what I tell my coaching clients to do. I went online, I found her email, and emailed her about why I love the book, the impact it had on me, and why she would be a great guest. To my surprise and delight, she was a yes. And on this episode, we get to talk about her story, why her book matters, the importance of curiosity and learning, and having a strong friend squad, no matter how far apart you may be today. All that and so much more coming up, but first, if you're interested in discovering what possibilities and businesses are available for you to create and to live your most fulfilling life, please visit thepowerfulladies.com/coaching and sign up for a free coaching consultation with me. There is no reason to wait another day to not be living your best life, when you instead could be running at full speed towards your wildest dreams today. I am so excited to have you tonight. Everyone that's listening, we are in the proud presence of Sasha Sagan, who wrote For Creatures Such as We, Rituals for Finding Meaning in Our Unlikely World. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I am so delighted to be here.
I read this book, and I was telling the story on Instagram earlier that I love books.
Me too. A lot.
Same. Like when at the end of your book, when you said how sad you are about all the books you know you will never read, I was like, someone gets me.
It tortures me every day. Like, it's impossible, but I think it's important to try.
I agree. So last year, with everything going on with Powerful Ladies 2.0 and launching the coaching business full time, it was wild. And it's the first year since I've been recording all of the books I read in Goodreads on the app since like 2004. It was the first year I blew it on my reading goal. And of all the things that I totally messed up on last year, that's the one that's like stuck with me.
Oh, yeah, that feeling. What was your goal and how many did you read?
I think my goal was 25 or 35, and I think I read like 16.
That's still really good.
Yes, thank you. It was good, but I was still like, the black mark. So this year I really committed to dialing down and being like, I am not going to let this happen again. Besides the fact that there are so many books I want to read, I'm like, no, this matters to me. And I need to be on top of my game for, half the books I read are about business and mindset and all the other things that I need to be a great coach. And so the first book that I started and finished this year was yours.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for writing it. Like everything I wrote in the email I sent to you was true. Like I read it and I was like, oh, what a great book to start the year with.
Thank you so much. That's so kind.
Yeah. So how about you just give a little snapshot of who's listening, like what the book is and where it came from?
So it's a combination of a few genres, I guess. It's part memoir and it's part social history. It's the elements that are about me are about my life growing up. My dad was the astronomer and educator Carl Sagan, and he and my mom, writer and producer Ann Druyan, wrote dozens of books and essays and the original 1980s season of the television show Cosmos together, and really taught me to celebrate and have, this kind of joyful wonder and awe for the world as and the universe as revealed by science. And so a lot of it is about that and about growing up like that, and also about what do you do when your worldview is scientific opposed to religious and you lose someone, because my dad died when I was 14. So those are sort of the elements that are very personal. And then the elements that are more general, more global are about our celebrations and our rituals and the ways in which we process change and mark time and do all the things that human beings do, and the through lines between cultures and time and place that are sort of remarkably similar in what we do.
It hit all of my favorite topics because my undergrad was in like urban anthropology and why people are the way they are. So
wow.
Love all of that stuff. And then it hit on, despite it being a scientific, not spiritual, it really connected the spiritual to the scientific, which I love. And the fact that you were telling these like just sweet stories that are very, I think all humans can relate to, no matter where they come from. I will never forget the ABC song "Peace."
Oh, thank you.
No, but really, like it was like such a small, I don't think enough people, we talk about being present so much and gratitude and all this stuff right now that could be very spiritually based. And so many people are not putting it into practice. And the fact that you point out like these little ways that you can put it into practice in every day that doesn't need to make it significant.
Right. And this idea, spiritual is, I struggle with this word so much because, of course, it comes from theism and it comes from like the idea of a spirit and all these elements that are really linked, to a theistic worldview, which I don't have. But I also don't have a secular word that invokes the same sense of like the hair on the back of your neck standing up and the feeling of being connected to the universe and to one another, and that sense of like you're tiny in the vastness, but you're here right now and you feel it from your head to your toes. And I don't know, maybe someday the meaning will take on this other meaning, or we'll find another word for it. But until then, I feel like spirituality and science are not necessarily in conflict, but rather that science is a great source of this kind of feeling.
Yes, and I don't think we give it enough credit.
Yes.
Like there are so many ways in which the universe is awesome.
Yes.
And I'm like, why aren't we celebrating more of that in addition to whatever else you may believe?
Well, I would argue that when we peel back the specific cultural, theological, mythological exterior of so many of our rituals and celebrations and practices, underneath there is a kernel of a real scientific event that is awe-inspiring.
Yes.
And, holidays fall around the same time of year, and their histories are linked so deeply to the solstices and equinoxes and the changing of the season, which are totally scientific and provable and real. And then we have stuff like, ceremonies for when a baby is born, coming of age rituals, funerals. These are biological events, and it's so easy to lose sight of that and get sort of bogged down in the details of how we mark these things and how, the stories we tell ourselves of why we do it, when what's so astonishing is that we're all doing the same thing. And it's scientific, there is a real explanation and a way we can study it and still have that sense of awe and wonder about it.
And I think that so many people who are searching for what they do believe in or find truth in, there's so many options if you wanted to choose. And I think sometimes the idea of choosing a scientific path makes people feel that there won't be celebrations and there won't be moments. And for you to tie it back to the history of all religions were scientific events or universal events.
Natural phenomena.
Right. Like you don't need to give up celebration if you're choosing to give up a religious, spiritual belief system.
Absolutely. And I think that, it doesn't I mean, if like you live in a place where in December it is cold and dark and it's like, the days are really short, the need for creating light and celebration and, like this is really hard right now, but how about we make things light up and have a party and make delicious food and give each other presents and we might feel a lot better, And it's like that doesn't require like total faith about the virgin birth or about the Maccabees or whatever the history, behind the explanation is for why the specific things are happening. And I think, I talk a lot about separating skepticism from cynicism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people who maybe grew up with faith or felt that it was sort of imposed on them when they get to a point where they let go of it, think, okay, well, I don't want anything to do with any of that because it was not working for me. But I think there's a way to honor some traditions and honor your ancestors without being bound by their theology.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've discovered in my, wherever I'm at in my arc of my story is I was getting a lot of inspiration from quotes from Rumi or Buddha or somebody else. And I had totally turned my back on ever accepting any quotes that came from the Christian religion. Because I was like, I don't know how I feel about this one. Like, it gave me a bad taste in my mouth. And I sat back and I'm like, why? Like, if these are quotes from humans of some kind and they all have some wisdom value to them, like, it would be totally ridiculous to turn my back on the one that was my family's tradition. Like,
totally.
When I had that epiphany, I was like, I'm an idiot. Like, this is, why not?
Well, but the pendulum has to swing with anything. It's like when you feel something is too far in one direction for you, before you can get to the middle place, you kind of have to go all the way in the other direction, at least for a little while. And then you kind of get to a point where you're like, I like these elements of it. But when it's something that, like, you don't, if it's like Zoroastrian tradition or something, like, you're not like mad about it. So you're like, sure, like, this works. This sounds great. I love it. If it's not something that you have felt was imposed on you.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I loved when we were in your book, you're going into so much detail about the scientific side of what you can create. It made me think of how there's a lot of conversation today about how religion isn't, it removes the relationship of the original source to the person, because religion is all the people who have come between the original concept and today, that they've put all their stuff on it. And how if you peel away the stuff other humans have added to it, it's a lot clearer of a message, no matter which book you are aligned with. And to me, it dawned on me like, oh my gosh, that's what's happening with the climate change discussion. Like, there's so much getting put on it by all different people with different motives and incentives that
and fears.
Yes, 100%. Like, so much of this is a framework to like not be afraid and survive.
Right. And I think this is the thing, and I talk about this a lot, but my mother always says there's no refuge from change in the cosmos. And it's like, change is happening. It's coming. It's not even, right? The idea of like being a traditionalist is about, holding on as long as you can, but change is inevitable. And I think the only question is, well, do we want to change things for the better or for the worse? I mean, we can't avoid that they're going to change. And so something like climate change, when you look at the situation and say, okay, well, the way we've been doing things, it's not going to go on forever in either direction, right? It's going to come to a screeching halt in some way or another. And we have to ask ourselves, well, what kind of change do we want to make? And because it is not, right, we cannot go back to, the 1950s or, 1,000 years ago or beyond. It's just we once we accept that, I think there's so much else that will be a little easier in life. But it's we're time traveling 1 second at a time into the future.
Yes, and I think as well, when we really look at the magnitude of the fact that even just the three of us, you, Jordan, and I, sitting here right now, the chances of that happening in this moment in this way, like you start celebrating everything to a different level.
Right. Well, this is the thing. People often say, oh, well, everything happens for a reason, as a reassurance. And to me, first of all, I don't believe that that's true, because my position is I reserve belief without evidence, and I don't have any evidence to suggest that. I think what's more likely is that things happen and then we retroactively reverse engineer a reason, you know? But if it's all random chaos and nothing is preordained and destiny is not real, then the fact that anything works out is amazing. And it's so like, you know, like if you believe that everything was always going to happen, then falling in love or running into your old friend or any of that stuff, it's like, well, this is inevitable.
Yeah.
But if it's just all just wild, chaos, then when things work out, it's really should be more amazing and it's more beautiful.
Yes, because you really see the what is the picture that the shell makes and the flowers, the scientific. I'm blowing it. What is this called?
Like a fractal?
Yes. Like even the randomness that things do have these beautiful patterns and there are these cycles. You're like, what are the chances that all of this would work out and create all of this and be amazing? Like, how lucky?
Yeah.
How lucky?
Yes. And how beautiful that we have, evolved brains that can perceive this, to understand even in the very small ways in which we are just starting to grasp our place in everything. And, in a few more century or a few more millennia, it's going to seem like, oh, can you believe it? In 2020, they thought they knew what was going on, those poor fools. But, we're getting a little bit of a glimpse. And that's amazing that we've figured anything out at all. And the ways that we have is because, being able to use something like the scientific method to test what can stand up to scrutiny and see where the evidence leads rather than putting our wishes and fears and hopes on it. Which of course everyone does in different ways, but using this framework to try to separate what we hope or think from what there's evidence for has revealed much more astonishing, much more breathtaking ideas and perspectives than anything we've had before.
Completely. We went out to Vegas this past weekend.
Oh, fun.
Yes, we were seeing the Mariah Carey concert.
Oh, wow. How was that?
It was actually fabulous.
Oh, yeah. I would imagine. If you were like, meh, I would have been shocked.
I had low expectations because I heard all these rumors.
Oh.
And it was on Jesse, my boyfriend's bucket list.
Oh, wow.
Throwing him under the bus on that.
Yeah. He's always dragging me to Mariah Carey concerts. Yeah. One of those. Yeah.
And so we drove out. And on the way, we listened to a Joe Rogan episode that had Brian Greene on it.
Yeah.
Okay. He's amazing.
Yes.
And the conversation they had, I was like, they're having the same conversation we're going to have.
Really?
No, they totally got, there was more scientific things that he went into, but they ended up on the concept of the rare chance that all of this works.
Yes.
Joe was asking, like, are there really, other aliens out there listening to us right now? And he's like, do you know the chances of that happening? And the fact that we've only been sending out radio waves for...
Right, since like the 30s. Yeah.
Right. And the fact that SETI from your father...
Yes.
That hasn't been that long.
Right.
So based on light years and all the speeds of everything... Do you know how long it's going to take them to get it and how long it would take them to come back?
If they're even interested. We might be so out of the way, in the sticks that they're like, oh, let's not even bother.
Yeah, they're like any species that could hear us and understand us would be so far ahead of us that we would look like ants.
Yes.
No one cares about us.
If there is anyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he'd be like people, reporting on such... normal, boring things that they wouldn't bother.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of me that was sad because I really feel like the world is awesome. But at the same time, I was like...
if they just got to know us.
There's so many good stories here.
I really feel like we just put our best foot forward and we could really knock their socks off.
Yeah, but it'd essentially be like dogs trying to impress humans.
Which they do on a daily basis.
Daily. Proud dog owner of 2.
Yeah.
And I'm quite sure that they are part human. So.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's what they'll say. Whatever the species is, like they're so, like some of them are so smart. They're almost, they don't think of them as humans. They're much smarter. So yeah. I mean, that's the thing, and I think that this question of like, is there life elsewhere in the universe, which is it was a question that my dad, was fascinated by and really wanted to know the answer. And people would say to him, like, well, what do you think? And he would say, well, I don't have any evidence, so I don't know. And they would be like, yeah, but like, what does your like gut tell you? And he would say, like, well, I try not to use my gut for this because it's not a good tool for figuring this out. I try to use my head. And the other, that sort of fits in with this other theme of this is something my parents really instilled in me, which is like the tolerance for ambiguity. Mm-hmm. And like when there's not evidence or there's not enough evidence, leaving open a question until there's more information, and the idea that sometimes we don't know, and that's okay, and that's better to admit that to ourselves than to force an answer because it's so uncomfortable, and it is often, to not know.
Mm-hmm. And this strangely ties into what I do on a daily basis with clients, because so often they have said no so many times or gotten themselves into a box where they don't even give themselves the possibility to say like, well, what if?
Right.
And so you're completely cutting off curiosity and learning and the discovery process and truly like going down the path of like, can we do this? Is it possible? And to me, that is like the most fun space to be in, because truly like anything really is possible until it doesn't work.
Well, and also it's like this, the largest philosophical questions fit into this, but the daily, like, the work email I sent, like, is that going to go okay? Whatever that is, like that idea of like, well, we don't know yet. Mm-hmm. And we just have to sit here and wonder. But I think with big philosophical questions and those daily, sources of anxiety, it's our fear and that things will go very badly, that makes it so that we just put an answer in there to protect. We think we're protecting ourselves, or we're so worried that it won't go well that we convince ourselves it's absolutely gonna be wonderful no matter what. And either way, I think we do ourselves a disservice because we're so bad at predicting what life is always, what you least expect. And it's just impossible. We're terrible at predicting this kind of thing, the stuff that's out of our hands.
There's a book out there called Super Forecaster. Oh. And like how, mostly for business and like how can you really plan what's going to happen and what the trends are going to be? And when I read the book, what I got out of it was that the people who are super forecasters, yes, they might be so niched into an area where they just know more than other people, so they're ahead of the curve.
Right.
But then the other people are the ones that are really like scanning everything so they can keep like adjusting and adjust. It's like it's sailing a boat instead of taking a train. Mm. And I'm like, we're not giving anyone credit for pivoting or adjusting. Yeah. Like, how did they get there? I don't know. They just kept adjusting the whole way.
Right. Well, and there are elements that become self-fulfilling prophecies. Yes. That is sure, like that does happen too. But yeah, it is. That idea of questioning and, asking questions and being willing to find out what the answer is either way. And from early childhood, it comes so naturally to us to ask questions, and unfortunately for many people, at some point they get totally discouraged with like a lot of like, that's just how it is, or because I said so kind of talk, and it's just the curiosity goes away.
It breaks my heart to see, or just not even to see, but just to know that we crush people into not being that spark that you are when you're a kid. Like, how as humans can we be okay with doing that to people?
I know. And it's because we're afraid to say we don't know, because we're afraid that, we'll lose. Like, I think sometimes people feel like if they say to their kids, like, that's a really good question, I have no idea, they'll like lose their like authority, over them, rather than giving the kids some confidence and teaching them that nobody has all the answers, and anybody who tries to say they do is up to no good. I really think.
Yes. And it's just impossible.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. Yeah, totally. And I think that we have, a really weird relationship with questioning. And I just think that if something can't stand up to scrutiny, it's not the responsibility of the questioner to preserve the institution or belief or, tradition, whatever it is. It's the responsibility of whatever the long-standing institution is to be able to stand up to questioning.
Yes.
And if the scrutiny is a problem, that's not because people shouldn't ask questions.
And most of history would show us whenever people stopped asking questions, shit hit the fan.
Yeah, it did not go well.
No.
Yeah, and it's a tell. It's a tell. If you don't want questions asked, it's because you're hiding something. If you're like, yeah, let's talk about it. And I have to say, I have had many people in my life and have many people in my life who are devoutly religious. And I think that the people who are the truest believers are not threatened by these conversations and not threatened by me not believing or other people in their lives not believing. It's when you cannot allow the thought of doubt to creep in. It's because you yourself don't want your doubt inflamed by other people's questions. If you're totally good with where you're at, you don't mind. I really think you don't mind. And not just about religion, but any philosophical, political,
family history.
Yes,
you name it.
Right, exactly. Anything.
Yeah. The lack of being honest about whatever it is. And you see it in how family habits cycle through. When you're not honest about what happened or, addiction problems people had or a rough past. Secrets. That is one of the secrets and gossip are probably the two worst things that we can do as an individual, a family, a community. Keep going. Because the secrets become lies. It just keeps going. And suddenly your reality is not. It's not based on truth.
And also then all your energy goes into preserving the facade rather than actually making things closer to how they should be or how you want them to be.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, good. I'm glad we solved that.
Get a little star on this one.
Okay, good. We check that right off the list.
So obviously both of your parents have been prolific writers. Did you always plan to be a writer in regards to books, or were you how did this book happen?
I did not plan to be a writer like this. I used to be a television producer, which I really liked, and I am very extroverted, and so sometimes I'm like, that was maybe a better fit because I was around people more. And then, I kind of wanted to maybe do screenwriting and sort of tried my hand at that a little bit and wasn't that good at it. But what happened was around, and I guess in 2013, all my parents' papers went into the Library of Congress, which was this enormous honor and this incredibly special thing. And there was an event to celebrate it. And I had, we went down to Washington, D.C., and my family and all these people who had worked with my dad. He died in 1996, so this is many years later. And I was I had this idea that the papers would be this, not in a supernatural way, but this extension. He was going to live a little longer because it was he was going to be in the Library of Congress, all his stuff. And it was this is there will be future generations who see his stuff. And in this way, he'll live a little longer. And we went to the thing and it was all these people who had been his grad students when I was a kid and now we're middle-aged, and all these videos of him young. And it was the antithesis of what I expected. I thought it was going to be this celebration of this eternal life. And it was being in a mausoleum. And it was of coming face to face with mortality rather than the antithesis. And after that, I just hysterically cried the whole time, made a scene. I'm sure lots of people were she needs help. But it was really, really emotional for me. And after that, it was kind of I had the burning sense of I have something I need to write about. And it was there's an essay in here. I got to get it out. If anybody else is interested, great. But it has to like come out of me. That sounds really graphic, but it just felt like very, like I had to get it down on paper. So I wrote that. A friend helped me out, and it ended up being published in The Cut. And a lot of it was about how do you deal with mortality when you don't have religion? And how do you deal with grief when you don't have religion? And the reaction to it gave me the idea that this is a question that a lot of people have, and this is an area of conversation that I think as the culture is getting a little bit more secular, although it's always hard to tell because who knows who was secular 1,000 years ago and just didn't dare breathe a word of it to anyone, raising children and having weddings and doing all these things. We sort of have to reckon with what we actually believe. So I wrote this essay, and then I thought, there was sort of a sense of like, okay, well, maybe there's more on this topic, but I didn't. I mean, I'm kind of like a little bit of a morbid person, but I didn't want to write only about death and mourning and grieving. And so I thought, I should also want to write about parties. No, all these elements of life on this planet that have traditionally, or at least for the last few millennia, the infrastructure has been religion, but it's still stuff that we need to do and to face and to enjoy, even if we don't have the faith.
Yeah, it's the pleasures of being human and being in community.
And it's so much the experience of life on this particular planet. That's something that I really came to realize as I was researching it. I mean, the timing of things, solstices and equinoxes and all these rituals that are tied to the phases of the moon and like anything that has to do with sunrise and sunset. Like these are parts of the astronomy of this planet with this particular orbit and going around this particular star at this particular rate. And I think that this idea, as we're sort of starting to, as a species, think about if we're going to go somewhere else, I think it's really interesting to think about what the things we do because we've been here all this time.
So one of the most spiritual experiences I've had was going to Oregon and seeing the eclipse.
Oh, yeah.
And we were at this big festival for it, and I didn't expect it to be as amazing as it was.
Yeah.
It was so incredible. We're actually going to Argentina this December to see the next one.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, but the thing that blew my mind after I saw this and I was like, whoa, was hearing that you'd have to go to Earth to, there would be eclipse tourism because it's the only place we know of based on the distances between the moon, the sun, and our planet and the shapes of them and the sizes where it can happen.
Wow.
And I was like, this just made it 100 times cooler than it was before.
That's amazing. I never thought of that before. And also the idea that maybe elsewhere there's other sort of optical illusions that are so evocative. There's so many, the eclipses in particular were for so much of history, this harbinger of doom or, the sign, because we're so tortured by our inability to predict the future that we just grasped at anything. And still now, the calendar, the Christian calendar is designed so that Easter can never fall on an eclipse.
Fact check, guys. Sasha followed up with an email after, and she wants to make sure that the calendar is designed so that there's never a solar eclipse on Easter. Small clarification, but she's like, cannot get the facts wrong here. Really?
Yes, because it's like the first, I believe it's the first new moon or full moon after the equinox, but it's designed and we have these deep. I'll have to just double check. I don't want to be wrong about that. We'll edit this out if I'm wrong. But we have these deep emotional connections that we have, it's sort of projected on these astronomical events. And it's just fascinating the way that it's so central to our experience here.
Yes. And I think, too, because there is so much predictability that we can find in nature and the universe and astronomy that we want to predict everything with it.
Right. Well, our lives depended on it.
Still do.
Right. Well, yes, exactly. But for so much of history, when people, I mean, all the springtime celebrations are at their root because we didn't always know we were going to make it through the winter.
Yeah.
And it was really scary. And people didn't survive, and it's like all of that stuff. And then the more we were able to work out, when the rains were coming or when the, fruits and vegetables were going to come, the more we were able to flourish. And so it became a survival mechanism, and we're addicted. Yes. We're addicted to trying to predict the future.
Yes. I think that's also why I'm addicted to learning. I'm like, what else can I know?
Yes.
I think it's fun personally.
Absolutely. I agree too.
Why not? I'm going through I made so many things I wanted to talk about. It's like, this is all exciting. And then you grew up in New York.
Yes.
We're also Northeasterners.
Oh, where are you from?
Well, I consider Boston home.
Oh, that's where I live now.
That's what I was going to hope we could take a bridge to. We were born in New Jersey. We've lived in upstate New York. We've lived in 11 different states, I think, as a family.
Wow.
Yeah. But, going from New York and Boston, there's obviously, you have to do certain things because of the weather.
Oh, yeah.
There's no way around it.
Yes. And I mean, so I grew up in upstate New York in Ithaca. I lived most of my adult life in New York City. And then 4 years ago or so, we moved to Boston. And it's I think that when you live in a place where the weather changes, in a really extreme way, it makes it so clear why the holidays and festivals are the way they are. Because, of course, for a lot of the world that's Christian, we're European powers that were Christian, obviously through imperialism and colonialism, their rituals and their traditions became, were in many cases forced on people who lived in totally different climates or in the opposite hemisphere where the timing makes no sense. It's and I think that, there's all sorts of things like that where, if you're celebrating Christmas in New Zealand, it's just a totally different experience than if you're doing it in Edinburgh. But I think that when we track back, the timing and the themes make sense. Mm-hmm.
How are you enjoying Boston?
I mean, I love it. It's great. I have a little girl, and it's a really great town for a kid. And, we love the aquarium and the MFA and the Boston Commons. And it is really, really special place. And the part of me also really misses New York City.
Yeah. I mean, if you have to choose, you shouldn't have to choose between the two.
That's true.
And it's nice that you can at least get to them easily.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, I get to go down to the city frequently, thankfully. Yeah.
Living here now, I do miss being in, whether it's New York or Boston, but in that just kind of northeast coast area where there's such a, I don't know, it's there's such a cultural attachment to learning and discussion and being engaged and having diversity in what you're doing and up to and exploring, that sometimes I'm what? Is that part of my DNA at this point, or what's missing? How do I find it here? And of course, there are amazing museums in California. There's lots of people up to cool things, all the time. But I think there's a different level of having discussions on a regular basis with strangers.
Yes.
That I really miss.
Well, you know what? It's a couple of things. One is I think that when people drive everywhere, you don't cross paths with as many different people as you do when you use public transportation and walk. And so you end up meeting people where you just kind of have a shared camaraderie with the strangers around you because you're together in a way that is different if everyone's in their own car. I also think that sometimes in places like Los Angeles, where a lot of people work in one particular industry that will remain nameless, then it's just everyone's sort of, I mean, obviously, and people do lots of things in Los Angeles, and I don't want to make it sound like it's just a company town. But I feel in other large cities, it's there's, you go to a party and people could be doing,
Yes.
they're at maybe like, in 20 different professions, and it's something you never heard of. And it's like, oh, wow, you're a brain surgeon and you're this or whatever it is. I mean, of course, people, there are doctors everywhere, but there's a different kind of integration, I think, professionally, whereas here it's a little more siloed.
100%. Like dinner parties are one of my favorite things on the whole planet.
Me too.
And I loved when you would plan a dinner party and be like, okay, we're going to leave a few seats open for these guests that I don't know who are coming, that someone's bringing. And like, I can't wait to see like literally who's going to show up and what they're going to bring to the table. Like,
Literally. Yeah.
Literally. So, and I do agree. Like there's a great book, a book that changed my life actually, called New Suburbanism.
Oh, what is it about?
It's all about how community planning impacts the actual community you're in. So they studied a lot of like the impact of suburban nation, how it impacted the development of suburbs and how it's changed American culture.
Wow.
Like it's driven like cars and all. So what they did is one of the towns they built is where they filmed the Truman Show, where they started bringing things back in that they knew worked. Like there's a rule that if you can walk to get milk and basic necessities, so it has to be like under half a mile from your house, it's a completely different community than not.
I'm really like... So a couple of things about me. One is, I mean, I have a driver's license and I can operate a motor vehicle, but it petrifies me. Like, I am not scared of flying. I am not scared of like public speaking, heights, but like operating a car, I mean, I really just avoid it if I can. And because I work from home and I work mostly alone, I really need to be in a place where like my errands are walkable, and I'm really sort of scared of the isolation of being in a place where you don't like, there's not people like around you. And I mean, I grew up in like a town, in like a house, in a freestanding house in a town, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But since I was 17 years old and went to college, like I have been in a building with other people around me. And I don't know if it's like some ancient hunter-gatherer tribal thing, but I'm like, this is how we're supposed to be. Like the idea of just me and my husband and our daughter in a house with no other people around, that seems like wildly scary and
it's
isolating. Yes, exactly. And all work and no play makes Sasha a dull girl.
Same.
Yeah, I cannot really envision how I would do that. I mean, who knows? But the suburban thing too, I think, is so interesting because, for so much of the last century, the goal was, I mean, my father was born in 1934, and he was born in Brooklyn, and his parents were, they were financially not in a, they were struggling. And then, over time, his father, worked his way up and they could move to New Jersey. Yeah. And now it's like, I mean, to leave Brooklyn, it's like you want to, if you can afford to stay in Brooklyn, you would, and it's like this totally different thing. And this relationship with the suburbs has changed so much where it's like, well, if you can stay in the city, that's so much more desirable for so many people. And I think it is, in a funny way, a call back to the idea of being in a group.
Community.
Yeah.
Our mother has a very similar story. Born in Brooklyn, raised in New Jersey, and I actually did your dad grow up in Bergen County?
Okay, Rahway. So he he went to college when he was like 16 because they used to skip people ahead when they were like really smart. So they moved there when he was like 14. So he only lived there for 2 years, I think. Yeah.
We're from our family is from the northern New Jersey part in Bergen County. But even that there, like the way it's designed is a much more sustainable community because there is walkability. There's trains. There's a town center. There's markets spread out. Like you're never very far from something that you need versus maybe the suburbs that were created in the 80s and 90s where you're in the middle and you're like basically a farm got turned to do a housing development. Yeah. And you're like, okay, I'll drive an hour to the grocery store, but I have a 5-bedroom house. And you're like, right. Doesn't add up to me.
No, I totally agree. And it's like a 5-bedroom house is great if you have like grandmothers and aunts and like everybody's like, you know, together. But just like a big empty house. And I think the more that we get things delivered and we order things online and we don't even talk to someone on the phone to order them, you could live your whole life with not having real contact with anyone but your immediate family who lives in your house. And it's just like that. I mean, some people that's probably very appealing, but I don't know. I really crave that sense of community. And I think that's something that, you know, if I were religious, that would be a really easy place to get that. But for those of us who are not, we have to really create it for ourselves. And I think one way to do it is where you live and how you live, but also just, you know, like you said, dinner parties, you know, these things that we like, okay, we're going to have book club or we're going to have, you know, these, and sometimes you have to be the ringleader and make it happen. But if somebody's not doing it, it's really easy to sort of lose that part of life.
It's so easy. And there's another great book called Bowling Alone that talks about how you used to have your bowling league or your whatever, the VFW or whatever you would go to. Like people were part of organizations outside of their home and work and religion.
Yeah, I want to say Rotary Club. I don't even know what that is, but it sounds like a thing that used to be a thing.
It is. It's businesses. It still exists.
Okay.
If you're like in a business, you get to be in Rotary. Okay. Yeah, fancy, right?
Yeah, I just picture like an old phone. Sorry, go on.
But there's a real gap in people craving this community, and when most of the U.S. is, I guess that's not accurate. Most of the population does live in a city, but there's a lot of people that don't.
Yes.
And it's not only do you get isolated from a physical perspective, but you get really isolated from a theoretical idea exchange perspective as well. And unfortunately, social media is not helping.
No, because it just reinforces.
It's just reinforcing it.
Yeah, and television too is, you know, where you get your news, all that stuff. And then it'd be like, I mean, it's been said a million times, but like the echo chamber.
Yes.
And I mean, you know, and it's possible no matter where you live to have that, you know, and of course, but I think that, there's something about having a regular place where you're obliged to be. And not that it's like mandatory, but where you're like, I should go, you know, unless you're sick or you're traveling or something, we're like, I should go to my thing. It's whatever, Tuesday, you know? And I think that there's something about that where if you don't believe that it's the should is coming from Mount High, you know, it has to be about what you value and what you know that you're going to get out of it.
There is a quote I heard recently about how impact is the greatest reward that you can have. And I'm totally obsessed with the concept of impact. But it changes. Like I read a book that is based in Christianity called Spiritual Leadership. And my favorite takeaway from it was if you wake up every morning and ask, who can you be of service to, your whole day changes.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, it's like, again, that's an example of it's a completely secular concept that why aren't we all talking about this?
And this is something I write about in the book. The thing I admire most about religion, organized religion, is the social pressure to do good works. That is something that I really wish was a bigger part of secular culture. And, you know, volunteering is something that solves a lot of these problems. You have a sense of purpose. You're moving you know, the world a millimeter at a time, maybe, but closer to the way you want it to be. And you got the camaraderie and the, you know,
all the warm and fuzzies,
and the like you know, group of people to commiserate with or just like high five or whatever, you know. And I think that if that was something that was just a wider, more, you know, if that was just something that like people were like, oh no, I have volunteering on Wednesday, I got to go do that, you know, and I just think that, and I know people want to do that, you know, and I know people, there's something missing in terms of the way it gets organized and the way that people think about it. And I think that if you're religious and you think that it is mandated, by God, then you're like, okay, I gotta show up and do this. And I think if you don't believe, like we were talking about, if you don't believe everything is preordained and there's not a rhyme or reason, there's not a safety net, the bad guys aren't going to get their comeuppance and the good guys aren't going to get their reward, and it's just chaos, well, then it's our responsibility to make things a little bit more just. And that's one way that you can do that.
100%. 100%. One of the, obviously we're on the Powerful Ladies podcast.
Yes.
And I would love to know, like, when you think of Powerful Ladies, like, what do you think of and who do you think of?
Oh my God, my mom, I'm probably does everyone come on here and talk about their moms? My mom, like, she really, sometimes I'm just like, so somebody else, so she does a lot of things, but one of the things that she does is she writes and produces and directs Cosmos, which was a show that my parents created together in the 80s. And then she brought back about 6 years ago. And now there's a new season coming out right now. I don't know when this is going to air, but March 9th, the new season premieres on Nat Geo. And it's this, she is the captain of the ship. And she is this, for someone who I'm friendly with, who works on the show, who is not an executive producer or somebody who's a little bit further down the ladder, was saying that they were going into a meeting and it was like a really serious meeting with like the network or something like that. And this guy was saying, like, I was really nervous about X, Y, and Z. And she just like went in. So, I mean, I don't want to I don't know what I'm not supposed to be saying about how, the secrets of how the show comes together. But she just went in with just totally fearless. And I was like, I can picture exactly what you mean. And just this like confidence of like, well, she has these moments where I'm just like, wow. And I think she's 70 and she is at the top of her game. She is creatively and professionally and confidence-wise, I would say, just like, skyrocketing. And it's just amazing because it's also so, for me, I really like feel this enormous sense of like relief that like we have this idea that, well, if you haven't done everything you want to do by the time you're 30 or 40 or, maybe if you're the new, something is the new 50 or whatever, but we have this idea that like there's a deadline, and she just has amazed me at every turn that like, and she's just brilliant. And, last night we were at the premiere of the new season and she created it. And a lot of it is an ode in a way, subtly, to my dad and the work that they created together. And I just think she just exudes this kind of powerful confidence that I hope maybe when I grow up, I hope to attain.
Well, that makes me come to my next question, which I really love looking at, always coming back to, am I making 8-year-old me proud? Because I really feel that's a time in a child's life when you know enough to like see what's possible and have some confidence and still be in that dreaming state.
Yes.
Without, your frontal lobe is more developed. So it's like you're like a mini adult for one of the first times.
Yes.
And so I always think if I can make 8-year-old me proud who loved She-Ra and Gem and the Holograms and Babysitter's Club, then I'm like, okay, I've won.
Yes.
When you think back to 8-year-old you, like what is making 8-year-old you proud right now?
Oh my goodness. I mean, this is like, I'm going to cry. No, I really, I think just like this idea of like being out in the world and like getting to say what you think, and people like, my parents were so like eager to hear all my thoughts and feelings about like, but like, then you go to school and you're like, it's not everybody, not every teacher, not everybody. When I was 8, I will say I did have a really great 3rd grade teacher named Julie Hurlbutt, who I loved. Out in elementary school and not everybody is always like so ready to hear all your thoughts and opinions. And, I always wanted to like travel and be, and I was very lucky and got to a lot as a child, but just like have a life where, every week or month was not necessarily the same. And there was like some variety and some just new adventure around the corner. And I feel really, really lucky right now that I think that little 8-year-old Sasha would be excited about that.
I love that. When you look at where you are now, living in Boston with your husband and your daughter, and this book has come out, like, what's next, and what are you excited to be creating next?
I'm really excited about. I mean, because of the book, I'm getting to go places and give talks and be part of conversations that I am really grateful to be a part of. And like, I'm gonna like talk at like South by Southwest in 2 weeks, and I'm doing this thing in Houston at NASA with my mom and like stuff like that, where I just feel like really excited to be in situations where I get to be asked questions and get to ask questions. And yeah, there's a lot of things that I want to do that I think I've sort of sprung from this book. So now I'm just sort of trying to figure out how exactly that all happens.
How important has having a group of girlfriends or close friends been for you in your life?
Oh my God. I mean, defining, truly. I have my same best friend's girlfriend. Well, guys too, but the girlfriend, I mean, no offense, guys, I love you. But the girls of my hometown girlfriends that I grew up with are my like ride or die, to borrow a phrase. And like we are in communication pretty much every day. And like the hysterical laughing and the like, when something bad happens, we're in it together. And it's something very traditional in a way, even though we are all across the country. For most of history, we would have been in our village together and we would have lived there our whole lives. Or if someone left, when they left, they left.
Gone.
Yeah. And because of science and technology, we are together and we see each other's kids, their faces growing up, and not just like, when something happens, but in the monotony of everyday life, we're in it together. And that is, I have 4 brothers, 3 half brothers and 1 full brother. I have no biological sisters. And I got to tell you, like, this group of women is really a sisterhood since early childhood. And I am so, so grateful for them. And it really does make going through the ups and downs of life completely different when you have a little tribe of sisters that is there for you.
Well, and so often you can't trust yourself in making the best decisions for you because we're so navel contemplative or stuck on something we want, and you're like, and you need your friends to be like that's a bad idea, that's not good enough for you. What are you doing?
And also, I think sometimes we have a tendency, and maybe this is just me, but like, a tendency to sort of like downplay the really exciting stuff and to have some cheerleading saying like, wait a second, that's awesome. Like, I know you said I could swear and I just censored myself. Let me try again. That's fucking awesome. And like actually get that sense of like, like the Greek chorus, saying like you did it. Like that's really amazing. And to have that, I mean, and it's like when it's your partner or your parent, you're like, well, you just like me. You know what I mean? And it's like your friends do too, of course. But there's just something about that feels so tangible. And like you think, oh, wow, I did get that done or whatever, do a good job. And I think that's really something so special. And it's something that if I was religious, I would have a women's group or some, there would be like that part of life of things that you were supposed to do together or whatever. And because we don't have that, we have to carve it out for ourselves.
That's why we've created Powerful Ladies.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the technology that allows us to be everywhere, I called my mother, who's currently in Connecticut babysitting our nephews.
Oh, nice.
And I'm talking to her on the phone, not FaceTime. And she tells him, like, oh, I'm talking to, Auntie Kara on the phone. And he's like, but where is she? Like, he asked questions the way that people would have in, like, 1901. But, like,
Yes.
But where are they?
Yes.
How are they in this box?
Yes.
I was like, wait, we've gone full circle. What is happening?
Yes, totally. Oh my God, and it's so, and then this, like, my friend's daughter was like looking at a picture of something from when we were kids, and she was like, well, how come it's not in black and white? And we're like, it was like in 1990. How dare you? Like, but like that idea of like everything before this moment, like it's so hard when you're little to grasp like how long ago things were and how quickly things have changed or not.
Yes. No, if they pick up a cassette, they're like, what do you do with this?
Yes, and I remember as a kid, like there would always be jokes about 8 tracks, and I like didn't fully know what that was, but I knew that was the thing before tapes, and that was now really passé. And like now, I'm like, my daughter is not like, was she ever going to even see a CD? Like,
no. Well, and that's what, when you go back to talking about all the technology and knowledge that we've lost in past civilizations. It's like if something would happen where all the digital things would go away.
No cloud.
We'd be so screwed. So screwed.
Well, or at the very least, it would be a big headache for future anthropologists.
Yeah, they're like, they were idiots. Like, this must have been a dark age.
Yeah.
And you're like, you just have to press the power button and you can find it all.
The files are inside the computer, like Zoolander, right?
Yes. I feel that's what, like, the ancient Egyptians are saying, like, you're touching the wrong block. Yeah. Like, stop it.
That's really funny.
It's right there. One of my favorite quotes is from Thomas Jefferson, and it's in a letter to his son, because he went abroad to France. And he says, once you go abroad, it'll be the most amazing thing you've ever done, and you will never be fully content again. And it really speaks to the fact that when you go out of your village bubble, you never get to have everything you love in one place again. And I remember going to a friend's, when I had first moved here, I went to a friend's baby shower in San Diego, and she had her high school friends there and college friends and her family and, friends from work. And I had a great time. And then I cried all the way home because I was like, I don't know if I will ever get that. And it was like, I'm so thankful for the moving and the traveling and all the things and the fact that I have people around the world that I cherish. And I was like, that's it. And then it made me think about Sex and the City. I'm like, I'm going to have to throw a party every year and they're going to have to come. And it doesn't have to be a wedding. It doesn't have to be a baby shower. You're just coming.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really true, is like that idea of finding the thing to celebrate, like the urge to celebrate, and then, okay, we'll figure out what we're going to celebrate. But to like really find the things in life that inspire that. And if the goal is to find the joy and find the togetherness, and then, that I think, right, we have these ideas of like, what is a reason to have a party or not, but all that stuff, we just made that up. So
and you can keep making it up.
Exactly.
It's like the conversation of everything is empty and meaningless, and because it's empty and meaningless, you can do whatever you want. Right. So like, if you don't like that, change it. If you want that, make it.
And we have this idea of like, well, this is traditional and this is how things are. But like everything that we think of as traditional is brand new on the scale of human history. Even if you are the most orthodox, the most devout, you're still doing things in a way that like 1,000 years ago they would have been like, whoa, slow down, this is totally way too modern, and I think that traditions and culture and customs, they have to mutate in order to survive, like everything.
I'm 100% like everything. So we ask everyone who comes in the show where they put themselves on the Powerful Lady scale. The scale is, 0, average everyday human, and 10, the most amazing, powerful lady possible. So where do you put yourself today, and where do you think you put yourself on average?
Oh, that's so interesting. Wow. My first instinct is like, that is not for me to say. I think that like, I would say that the person who's the one, on that scale, that is still a superhero in some ways,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's, I think, there are days where I'm like, I'm a disaster and I, very minor, errands seem impossible. And then there are days where I feel like so on my game. And so, I don't know, I'm having a good day. I'll say a 5. But I think that for everyone, even, dare I say, were I to guess, even Beyonce sometimes has a moment where she doesn't feel like she's wearing like a superhero cape.
Yes, for sure. For sure. I honestly love asking that question just because I'm so excited to see what people say.
Yeah. What's like, what's the wildest answer you've gotten?
I'm really impressed when people are like, I'm a 12. And I'm like, yeah, girl.
Wow. Yes.
And then someone who is so badass would be like, I think I'm a 2. Because if I'm a 10, I have nothing to work for.
Oh, yeah.
So it's totally psychological and fascinating.
Yeah.
And I'm sure someone should take that question and study it because
yeah,
it really reveals a lot about so many different layers. Being the mother of a daughter.
Yes.
What do you really want her to know about what it means to be powerful and a lady and all the things wrapped into what it means to be gender identity women, or at least born female?
Yes. Oh God, that's such a good question. I think that there's something really valuable about the idea of like if you I don't know how to even exactly describe this because it's so hard, but I feel like I was born at a time, and maybe the place I grew up, or I guess maybe the school was really good, but I felt like I had to learn that later that sometimes girls were told that this is going to sound really weird, but that they're not good at math and science. And I'm like, oh, what? My hope is that my daughter has to be taught that this has been a problem historically rather than being like, yeah, I know. And, I think there is just something to be said for just having that. It's like, I don't want to say you can do just as well as a boy. It's like, well, there's all of this stuff is totally artificial, and the cracks are already these walls are coming down. I'm picturing the Berlin Wall.
Yes.
We're dismantling this system, and you'll have to study it in school because or read about it in a book because you're not hopefully gonna live it. And that's sort of my hope, is that the conversations we have about this are her being like, is that true that used to be that way? Because I feel like I was really lucky and was so encouraged that I didn't even realize until probably late elementary school that this is an issue.
Well, and for me, even later, when I started going out into the world and being like, wait, someone told you couldn't do something? No matter what gender you are, it still catches me off guard when someone's like, oh, I can't do that. And I'm like, how do you know?
Well, also, it's gotta be 100% of the time about the thing that person wanted to do that they didn't get to do. Yeah. And I think that, that is what's so painful is it's it's the hurt people thing,
Yeah.
It's like if someone's telling you can't do this, it's because they wanted to.
Yeah. And so often it comes from back to that fear conversation.
Yeah.
I don't want you to get hurt like I did. So just don't even think about it.
But it's
go
that's
somewhere
not
safer.
It's right. It's unfortunately, that is not a good system. And also, how does it stop unless somebody finally does it?
Yeah. No, completely. Powerful Ladies completely came out of not feeling the need to advocate for women, but because, like you said about your girlfriends, there are women in my life who, when I'm with them, I'm like, I am such a badass.
Yeah.
And when I lose connection with those people, I lose connection with how powerful I actually am.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me how there are some people who there's just something about your interaction where you realize oh my God, I'm a badass. You are together. oh my gosh, we can do anything.
Yes.
And then I realized that there were people in my life who had never felt that. And I was like, we got to stop this.
Yeah.
Like, there are amazing people I know and amazing people I haven't met yet. And we're all going to hang out and shit's going to change.
Right. And I think it's like that ping pong effect, and it can go either way. There's also people who like, they feel miserable, then you feel miserable, and then that kind of thing. But there is the really beautiful ping pong effect of like that mutual like confidence and lifting each other up, and like having a comfortable place to talk about things that are sometimes uncomfortable to talk about. And like that is just, that's like having a superpower.
It truly is. And also just the fact that there's so many things that we haven't talked about that when we do talk about, you're like, oh wait, we all do this?
Right.
And it's no big deal?
Right.
So why I've been feeling like shame and guilt and all these other things about it, like, this is so dumb.
Yeah, well, I know, but it's so hard. And it's like the imposter syndrome is the first thing that comes to mind. And I just like the number of women who like from afar or even up close, and I'm like, oh, you're so cool and smart and confident. And obviously, you know that at every minute of the day. And they're like, oh my God, you have all those totally terrifying fears that are like, I'm not supposed to be here. They're going to find out that I'm not,
Yes.
And it's like, it's just amazing. And there is something really reassuring. I'm like, well, if she's nervous about that, I'm like, okay, it's, I mean, on one level, you're like, what hope do I have? But then on another level, you're like, okay, then this might just be like the baseline of existence.
Yes. And that, like founder's fraud, it's a real thing. Like everyone feels it.
Yeah.
And, to your point, like we keep coming back to the same theme of like what we do when we're afraid.
Yes.
And when you're afraid, you don't share, you don't pass your knowledge on, you feel like you have to keep it and hide it.
Right.
And I just love the idea of like, give it away.
Yeah.
Give it away. Like it's actually, you are going to be more powerful giving it away than doing anything else, because then it can multiply and ripple out and all the things.
Oh, so yeah. And people like when people are vulnerable. It's really hard to like somebody who doesn't ever show vulnerability, who's not at least a little self-deprecating or something, like it's really hard to connect with someone who's just totally 100% confident all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like you actually end up, that's like something really powerful is like when you put down your defenses, you actually can feel a little bit more loved, you know?
Yes. For some reason, my head went to Martha Stewart when she like came out as BFFs with Snoop Dogg.
Oh, yes.
Like a whole new career.
Yeah, well, I thought you were going to say when she went to prison, and which obviously you should not insider trade or whatever she did, but like that, I was like, okay, so she's not so perfect. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, okay, all right, I can sort of see her in a different light. Mm-hmm. And she definitely came out cooler.
Right.
I mean, I'm not advocating going to prison for white collar fraud as a solution or a way to make more friends. That's not what I'm saying, for the record.
We know what your next book is going to be about.
Exactly. No, I'm just saying that it's like when you pretend to be perfect all the time, it sucks.
Well, you do set a standard that we're all trying to now race towards. Yeah. But it really isn't because we want to hang out with you. It's because we're like, okay, now we need that too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's also, it's like you want to be worshipped. You don't want to be loved when you want to be perceived as perfect.
Yeah. And worship can't go both ways. It's no fun. No fun. What do you want our audience to know about?
Oh, well, my book is called For Small Creatures Such as We, and you can, get it where you get your books. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Sasha Sagan.
Well, this has just been amazing.
Oh, thank you. I feel like we could do this for like 6 hours.
Yes. This is why Jordan has to like keep on me, because she's like, okay, you can't talk for 8 hours because then I'll have to do like 6 podcasts. And so my replacement for that is like, we'll just have to have you back on.
I would love that. Thank you so much. That would make me very happy.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And you have been truly wonderful.
Thank you. Anytime.
I I'd already decided before I met her that I was a committed fangirl, and I'm pleased to report that meeting people you admire in real life does not disappoint. Go and invite them. Go and connect with them. You never know what's going to happen. It was a joy to have her on this episode, to get to introduce her to all of you, and to make a new friend who is a great addition to the Powerful Ladies crew. To connect, support, and follow Sasha, you can follow her on Instagram at Sasha Sagan or visit her website, sashasagan.com. You can, of course, also buy her book everywhere books are sold. In addition to supporting Sasha, I highly recommend you check out both the original Cosmos from PBS, as well as the newest edition released on March 9th on National Geographic, hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Every way that you can connect with Sasha and everything she discussed is, of course, available in our show notes at thepowerfulladies.com/podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this new episode of the Powerful Ladies podcast. If you're a yes to Powerful Ladies and want to support us, you can subscribe to this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating and leave a powerful review on Apple Podcasts. You can also be one of our Patreons for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/powerful ladies, where you can get access to exclusive content that we're making just for you. Follow us on Instagram at Powerful Ladies and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page. And of course, visit our website, thepowerfulladies.com, for all the latest news, details, and updates. I'd like to thank our producer and audio engineer, Jordan Duffy. Without her, this wouldn't be possible. You can follow her on Instagram at Jordan K. Duffy. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Until then, I hope you're taking on being powerful in your life. Go be awesome and up to something you love. This episode of The Powerful Ladies is made possible by our Patreon subscribers. Did you know that for as little as $1 a month, you can support this podcast? You can send us love, tell us that you want more. You can support all of our events and all that we're doing in the world to fulfill on our full circle of empowerment. It starts at $1 a month. That's less than the coffee you're drinking a day. And there's so many more levels that give you more bonuses and fun things and behind the scenes information. So go to our Patreon, patreon.com/powerfulladies, and support us today. Thank you in advance.